It is a lot to say, I'm going to get raw, uncomfortable, and take time and do an intervention. It's not comfortable.
No.
It's the confrontation, the conflict. That's beautiful that you still had 10 people left.
To be willing to go through that process with me.
Yeah.
And the risk of that shows me the love that they had for me.
You know, no matter how much you love someone, addiction is bigger than what you as a loved one can wrap your mind around, or trying to, coach your way or in a positive way, like manipulate the person into making better choices or whatnot. Saying no and giving boundaries are really the only thing that can harness addiction for people like you and me.
Yeah.
This is Rooted Recovery Stories. I'm Patrick Custer, your host, and so glad to be here. As you can see, if you're watching, we are not where we normally are in Nashville. We are in Los Angeles, and I'm so excited to be here with my friend and guest, decorative painter James Mobley. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you.
Absolutely. I'm so glad we're here together today, and I'm really excited about every time you and I have a conversation. I feel like we quickly and easily dive deep into just such meaningful stuff of life.
Absolutely.
And I'm glad that the audience gets to join in on this one.
Me too.
Yeah. So where do we want to start today? So you and I have touched on so much with your personal life, but for those who don't know, and you were to give an elevator pitch of just who you are and where you come from, where would you start?
I would start with, I was born in Detroit, and grew up in Michigan and left Michigan when I was 19 to move to Chicago, kind of a wanderlust. Lived in Chicago for a while, lived in Paris for a hot minute, lived in Arizona, then New York, and then here in LA now. So, and my life spans from kind of three different things. I trained as a musician when I was really young, but I was always an artist and always interested in fashion. So there's like all these things that kind of whirl around in my head on a daily basis.
Yeah.
But that's kind of who I am. I'm those three things that interest me, and that's what kind of takes me to different places. And LA has been home for about 10 years, and I really find that this is a good home for me.
Good.
Yeah.
What got you into this specifically? Explain, if you will, what it is that you do, because like the name itself, like you could derive a lot of things from it, but
right. So decorative artist, decorative painter, however you want to look at it. I create murals for mostly interiors of homes. Mm-hmm. That sort of enhance an experience and create something really beautiful for people's homes.
Yeah. I think it's difficult to put words to exactly what it is. And when I've talked about your work before, I'm like, I always just have to say, hold on. We just got to go to his Instagram, because I can't really describe.
I'll show you a picture.
Yeah. And, so it is really cool. So I would encourage, if you want to know what James does, you should definitely go to his Instagram. It's going to be at the bottom of the show notes. If you're listening right now, what is your Instagram handle?
James_Mobley_design.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And so what led you to get into and specifically focus on this as your main?
I worked in fashion, like doing windows and mannequins and that sort of thing. So it's visual merchandising. And I did that for a department store in Chicago. And part of the training is that you learn how to paint props, and you learn how to paint backdrops. And I already really loved painting, mm-hmm. and always have. And so I took to it really quickly. And some friends of mine that I worked with in the store, they're like, "Oh, I'm having a baby. Can you paint my baby's room?" Or there's a client that wants me to, reach out to you and see if you can paint something for them. And it turned into a business, and I had to I did it full time, quit my job when I was 25.
Wow.
And I always thought, well, I can always get a 9-to-5 job again if I needed to, but it worked out really well. And then I did that for about 11 years and then went back into fashion and got kind of burnt out from it. And so I went back into fashion, did that for another 9 years and got to work for a really amazing Italian clothing company. And then friends of mine who are in the design business reached out and asked me to do something for them, and which was in, a major design magazine. And then I did a couple other things. They'd have a TV show. So I did a episode of that. And just with all of the promotion of it, I had to again quit my job, not at 25, but much later in life. But yeah, and that was almost 6 years ago.
So the visibility launched.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's really cool.
It's crazy.
Well, that's what a great story of just, I don't know. I think it's great when people use their position of influence to, I don't know, feed into, somebody who's got skills as a friend of theirs, and it creates more and more good in the world. I think we all, no matter who we are, we all have a sphere of influence, a circle of influence, whether we level up in a corporate job or a socially or, Instagram for whatever reason, and that, I think that recognizing the level of influence and power that we have, and just being honest with ourselves about it and how we use it is so important, because there's always people that come behind us that are less experienced, that are less, that have less of whatever that collateral is, right, that could benefit. And recognizing that and using that responsibly to, benefit others' lives. I admire the heck out of people who do that. And I try to do that myself as much as possible, because, I don't know. I think that it's like, too much. What does that say? To those who've been given much is expected, or I'm butchering it. Like do you know what saying I'm trying to say? Yeah. So you and I met and bonded over a shared, lifestyle experience, healing process. Yes. And so take me back to, what it is that you have, what have you found healing from, and where did my journey up to sobriety was, I look at my life until, like, let's for example, when I turned 25 and I quit my job and decided to work on my own, it was like such a huge opportunity and responsibility, and went with it. And at the same time, it was also the same year that my father passed away. And so 25. How did he die? Do you mind me asking? He died of a brain tumor. Oh, wow. Yeah. He was 47. Wow.
And, it took me a while to grieve that passing. It was life-changing, but it was life-changing in a way where I didn't realize how much that his life, our relationship was such an influence on my life, even though we had sort of a sordid past as far as him being around. But it really dictated my relationships and how I interacted with my partners.
How?
There was definite codependency, replacing this person for my dad, like, being gay and having relationships with men. After his passing, that first major relationship after that happened, I kind of unknowingly replaced my dad with that person, and stuck by him and probably gave him too much leniency when it came to what was happening in the relationship. And we stayed together for about 8.5 years. And when that finally fell apart, that grieving process of my dad kicked in again. And my only way of being able to handle that was something that I've started to introduce into my world, which was drinking and drugs. And I was like, oh, I know how to not feel anymore. So I'm going to just do that. And I could balance that lifestyle with being an independent contractor and working and what have you. But what finally happened is it caught up with me, and I could not show up. I couldn't show up for my life period. So that all kind of crumbled. And luckily I had people that were around me that really cared about me, that said, you need to get help.
When you say you couldn't show up for your life period, what do you mean by that?
I stopped caring. I stopped, I did have a position with a company at that point. And the woman that I was working for, she had to let me go. And then I kind of pulled myself together a little bit. And then she hired me back at a lower position, and that crumbled within weeks and had to be fired again. And then stopped paying my rent and got evicted, and had to sleep on people's sofas. And when it got to that point is when my friends were like, we know what's going on and we're not going to put up with it. So you can't be reaching out to so-and-so for money. You can't be doing this to, make your car payments, and we're not going to do it anymore. So you have two choices. And it was an intervention, and the choices were get help tonight, or you're not going to have us as support and help you going forward. So I luckily I don't know if it was a spiritual awakening at that moment or not. I kind of think it was. And there was a bit of a calmness that came over me. And I thought, oh, I do need to get help. What am I doing? This is not who I am. And so that started that journey.
You felt a sense of surrender.
Absolutely surrender to it
pretty quickly.
Yeah. Because I did have that option to, get in my car and drive
right
wherever I wanted to, but just not call them anymore. All 10 of those people that were in the room.
Right. Which were probably the last 10 that were willing to participate in your life.
Right.
And yeah. But that's pretty special too. For anybody that like me, like us,
right.
When we hit our bottom, that you've got 10 people that are willing to get together that love you enough to, because that's hard. It is a lot to say, I'm going to get raw, uncomfortable, and take time and do an intervention. It's not comfortable.
No.
It's the confrontation, the conflict. It's, we talk about all the time, like people that have, are conflict averse or, have issues around conflict. Nobody likes, I take that back. There are some people who do like conflict, but I think the great majority of people do not like conflict. And they're, I think they're just varying degrees of
right.
Disliking it. And so, that's beautiful that you still had 10 people left, because that's not the case for a lot of us when oh man.
Well, to your point, to be willing to go through that process with me.
Yeah.
And the risk of that shows me the love that they had for me. So yeah, thank you for bringing that up, because I don't very often think about that.
Well, and I think the reason why I think about it is just because of my line of, outside of this, the other stuff that I do in treatment is so much of, I see into the family side, all the players that are in, the circle of the, the person entering recovery already in recovery and the, you know, beginning stages and things. And so I quite regularly see into that and those dynamics and the repeated dynamics. And, you know, for a lot of people, it's something that they experience once because they're part of it from an outside, right? They were one of the 10 or they were the you or me, right? Because it was, for me, it was, I also was intervened on, but it was all my siblings, and, you know, it's different when it's blood, you know?
Right.
I'm not saying it's better or worse, but
no, and my mom was invited, but they said, you know, why don't we, because it was in Arizona and she lives in Michigan, and they're like, let's see how this goes. We're not going to have you come out right now. Let's see how it goes. And then she came to visit me about a month later at the halfway house. So,
yeah. So before we get into the healing stage, I really like to flush out, as much as you're comfortable, what it was like, the struggle that led you there. And I know you described, like, from your job. And so for so many of us, depending on what stage of life we're in, you know, our work is so much of how we would define our life. So it makes sense that would be where you go to explain to me how your life was falling apart. But there were other ways it was falling apart. Like, if you were to talk about, like, what was your usage like? How had it progressed? What was your sleep like?
Yeah. So it would be, I was living with a friend of mine, and I remember it being like just my priority. It got to a point when I was still roommates with him and he would drink and use as well. But I started hanging out with a different group of people and kind of getting into a little bit more riskier behavior, and introduced to some ways of doing drugs that I didn't enjoy, but I was like, oh, I just tried smoking crystal. Like, it was way too much of a high at that point, but I don't know if I continued, if it would have gotten to a level where I needed to get that high. So, but I knew at that point, you know, where my balance was just as a drug user. So for me, it was drinking daily. It was doing cocaine probably in the beginning, like every weekend. And then it would creep into, like, you know, Thursday night karaoke, and then we, you know, it's sort of that sort of thing. And it was like, and then Sunday nights would end up being a big party night. So then Monday morning to try to get to work was like next level. So I changed my schedule. So I worked from Tuesday to Saturday, but then showing up Saturday morning after Friday night, it was like, and it just became more of my priority.
Right.
I became really, when I look back on it, the only word I can think of was very arrogant, and not, I pride myself in being someone that's humble and someone that respects the gifts that I've been given, as far as being a musician or being an artist or what have you. And I felt like I was losing that part of me, where I was like, oh, not that I walked around with an attitude, but I just had this, like, it was arrogant.
Yeah.
Because
if the gifts, if what you're using to support yourself in life and find meaning, and, you know, has to start becoming second,
right?
Because the lifestyle / substances have to be first. I mean, like, it's the nature of the beast. And like the relationship I had with this woman that I worked for, it was like, oh, you should be able to deal with the fact that I'm coming in late, because I'm doing all these things, all these wonderful things, and bringing so much to the table, working for you. Mm-hmm. And in my head, that's what I was thinking. I wouldn't have admitted to it then, right.
But then you have to realize that there's all these other people that work for her that are like, we know you have a special relationship with him, but you can't he can't get away with this. Something's going to happen here.
Yeah.
And she finally had to make a decision. So, and probably did me a favor.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, those things that on the outside, and for people like your boss, our bosses, any, authority figure in our lives that finally do, no matter how much they love us, end up putting their foot down and saying no. It feels so counterintuitive to love, and is probably it is so hard for them. But I wonder if she knows, or have you gone back and talked to her after how much of an impact that probably had on, influencing your bottom even being possible?
Right. No, absolutely.
That's one thing that I think is so important for us to talk about, and that people hear regularly, is that, no matter how much you love someone, you cannot love them into realization that what they're doing is, addiction is bigger than what you as a loved one can wrap your mind around, or you as a boss can wrap your mind around, trying to, coach your way, or in a positive way, like manipulate the person into making better choices, or whatnot. Saying no and giving boundaries are really the only thing that can harness addiction for people like you and me.
Yeah. And it helps us now how to support people that are struggling. Like, we understand how important the boundaries are, and how to help in a way that's loving, but also, I'm going to give you this, but that's it. Like, I can't, I know what's going to be, I know what I needed, and hopefully that's what you're going to need as well.
Yeah.
But to find their own path in a way that's helpful, it's a struggle for me to help, in the 12 steps. I mean, the 12th step, either as a sponsor or just as a friend. I mean, I have friends in recovery now that have had years of sobriety and then just go back out, and it's just like, how am I going to be the best support here? You know?
It's difficult.
It's difficult.
It really is.
Because I want to shake them, stop it,
I know.
But I'm in a really loving way. So.
Yeah. One thing I want to ask you about is, we all have varying degrees of this. Did you have any insight into, as the disease progressed for you, how much you were, like, the level of delusion that you had, the level of lying that you were doing,
my God.
The level of, right? Because for me, the reason why I want to ask you this question is because for me, I believed that, so the majority of my life, I mean, like really what you've said about yourself. I was studious. I loved to be creative. I loved other people. I loved to love. I considered myself a good person, and one that, made good choices. If I made a mistake, I really cared about righting that mistake. And so as the disease progressed, like, the delusion for me had to be like, it was the lying to myself.
Yeah.
First and foremost. And what level of insight did you have into that whole narrative? Like, cause I could sit here and talk to you about mine all day long, and people outside of our circle would be like, good God, that sounds crazy. But you would get it, know?
I mean, just lying to myself is exactly right. I mean, let's go back to this job that I had before I got sober. I mean, I would bring drugs with me to work. And that was all of a sudden that was acceptable to me. Like, oh, I didn't sleep last night, so I'm going to bring some with me so I can stay coherent throughout the day. I know I can't get away with drinking on the job, but I know if I did a line or whatever in the bathroom at 11 o'clock just to keep me through to hopefully noon, I was just like, again, that level of arrogance that this is, and that level of lying to myself.
And do you remember like how it started? Was it, because I'm assuming, I'm not going to put words in your mouth. So when you talk about like, went to the job, loved my job. It was at the nights, but then I started, bringing it to the work. I'm curious, like that, do you remember the first time you brought cocaine with you to work and your thought process, like the what it was at that point, and then what made you decide it was okay to bring even more, and then what, you know what I'm saying?
Right. Well, it got to a level of because the dealer lived only about 3 miles from where I lived, and I lived close by as well. And a couple of times he would come to the coffee shop that was in the mall, and I would meet him over there, and we would have an exchange.
How nice. I never had a dealer that would come to my coffee shop and just what a thoughtful gentleman. I
was in Arizona recently, and I was driving down that street, and I looked over in the parking lot of that mall, and I was like, good Lord, who is that guy? Who is that guy? And I come over to his car and smiled and hey, how's it going? And I dropped money on his passenger seat, and and it was like a whole thing. I was just like, I thought it was funny or cool or whatever. I mean, It was just, I was like, oh, this is my life and it's fine. It's totally acceptable.
Do you remember thinking about, I mean, I know it's very in the moment when we're in active addiction, but not always. So do you remember thinking about how, okay, so this is life? Because I remember having that realization too.
Yeah.
But at all in the future, right? Am I going to keep doing this? Did you ever jump into?
I had, so it's what's interesting about the people that had the intervention is that most of them were people that I drank and used with, but they knew when the party stopped. Well, back then they knew when the party stopped. And I thought, oh, they can function. So I should be able to function and be able to do this. But what it was is that I started using more than them because I was hanging out with people that this was a different lifestyle for them. And so backing out of the people that were functionally able to do this and party on the weekends or party once a month or whatever it was, I was like, no, I want to party more than that. So I'm going to shift over here. So yeah, that's part of it too for me.
Had you started to isolate from those people?
Yeah.
Clearly, there's one thing of spending more of your effort and attention with these people who are using, drinking more like you.
Right.
But then on top of that, there's a whole other level of not only am I putting my effort, attention, and time with these people, but I'm pulling away and literally pulling away from, and isolating the communication and presence with these other people. Do you remember why you were isolating from them aside from using more with these people?
Right. Yeah. I looking back on it, I think I was embarrassed that I was getting to the level I was.
Yeah.
If I want to be honest. So I was like, oh, it was almost being around family where I was like, oh, you're not gonna like this behavior. So I'm just gonna, instead of stopping what I'm doing, which would have been much better for me. But I couldn't, hence its addiction, that I needed to just want to hang out with like-minded people. So
I couldn't find towards the end of my career, I couldn't find people drinking and using like I was.
Wow.
I mean, I'm sure they existed, but it was, it's like they weren't accessible to me for whatever reason. And so what that turned into was like I isolated from all my drinking and using buddies because they started to, they were making comments and things of being concerned and what have you. And when you're drinking and using, friends are concerned. I hated that word. Like, you're gonna say
right?
What?
And it doesn't register.
Concerned?
Yeah.
What? Since when?
Right.
Were you concerned on Saturday?
Right.
But
I've seen you fall down drunk.
Yeah. How's that different than like what? But when those people start to, for me, the disease kicked in. It was like no longer safe.
Yeah.
Gotta pull away.
And I was very happy with, being home and getting high and drinking.
Yeah.
By myself with my dogs, and just like, it was weird.
Which had that evolved?
It got to that point. Yeah.
Because I mean, like typically people don't start out like first bump of cocaine. This would be nice to do alone at home.
Right. It's not meant to be alone.
No.
No, it's supposed to be a party out.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This podcast is brought to you by Promises Behavioral Health. If you or a loved one are struggling with trauma, addiction, or mental health, we are ready to answer your questions and help you take that next step. Call our admissions center at 888-648-4098 or visit us online at www.promises.com. Our team is ready and waiting to answer the call for help.
Oh, so I like to go on that narrative and that trajectory a little bit, because I feel like in, the rooms of recovery, the spaces that we tell our stories, I feel like it is quickly rushed that we go to solution so quick, so fast. And I'm not trying to place judgment on that, but I have time and time again seen the value in my own connection to people's stories, both now and when I was in early recovery. And it's so much easier, I think, to connect with your story when I hear how you struggled first.
Right.
And if I can't connect to that, it's going to be a lot harder for me to hear the solution.
Right.
So I kind of wanted to outline why I ask you all those questions, not to get the dirt on James, but
what it was like is important.
Yes.
Yeah. And what happened. And
yeah. And so we, moving into the intervention piece, I love that you said that place of surrender just met you where you were at right then. And it's funny that just as I said that, you took the deepest breath, and I watched your shoulders lower. I love that there's that connection and that memory for you. And so, take us on the journey from, after saying yes, packing your bag, what happened next?
Yeah. So it was the Friday before Memorial Day, and, there was a van that was going to come pick me up. When I said yes, they made a phone call, I think. I mean, I'm not too clear, but they already made arrangements for somebody to come pick me up. And it was a facility in Mesa, Arizona. So it was like about 20 minutes from where I was crashing.
They were like, we're not even going to drive you.
No, there's someone actually. Yeah, exactly right. So I get to the facility and they did an intake. And by this point I'd gone out the night before, but this is Friday night at like 10:30. So I stopped drinking, using like 3:00 in the morning the night before. So I'm stone sober at this point. And I get to the intake and they, do some vitals, and they're like, okay, you need to go into this room. And it was actually kind of an open room separated by a pony wall, like a half wall. And that separated men from women, I guess. I don't know. There were only like maybe 2 of us in that whole area. And I remember the smell of peanut butter, because there was like a shelf on one end that had like, if you wanted to eat some peanut butter and jelly, it was like right there. There was plastic over the mattress. I think I fell asleep for a minute. I woke up the next morning and a counselor found me, and we had a sit down, and he said, I looked over your vitals. I looked over what the notes were from the intake person. He said, this facility is for this type of addict and people in this state. So we think that this is probably not the best place for you. But these are your options. And I want to, sit down with you and let you know that, maybe going into a halfway house would be the best option for you. And these are a list of places that you can go to. And, so I called my friends and I said, they're basically going to kick me out of here. So
they felt like you weren't as severe of a
right.
case.
So they're like, we have people here that are coming off of heroin and coming, like all these different things where it's like a next level. And I was like, and I kept calm because I could have, looking back, I'm like, I could have used that to my advantage and say, I'm not a,
thank you for that, validation.
Exactly.
I'll take that ticket and go right back.
But I called my friend and I said, can you please come pick me up? And none of these halfway houses will be able to take me until Tuesday because it's a holiday weekend. So they basically babysat me for the weekend. They had my car somewhere that I didn't even know where it was. And I chose a halfway house that was closest to everyone. And it was, I got there on Tuesday, and the guy at the front desk, or the manager at the front desk, he said, we'll take you in. We don't have a bed just yet. But you can sleep in the TV room on the sofa. I was like, looking back on this, for whatever reason, I was just so willing to do anything. It's remarkable at, 4 or 5 days sober, just to be like, yes, whatever I need to do, just tell me what I need to do. And I slept on that sofa for 2 nights. And then there was a bed available, and it was 4 men to a room. And we had, each of them was like it was like a motel in a way. And there was bunk beds in each room. And I was in a room like that for 3 months.
What were your restrictions or requirements? So
the first 30 days, there's a curfew at 6 p.m. It was a 12-step program. So I had to go to a meeting every day, get a card signed by the secretary of the meeting. And I had to find a sponsor, and I had to start working my steps, and I had to find a sponsor and start working my steps the first week. So they gave me 7 days to find a sponsor. And
do you remember how many days you took to get one?
I moved in on Tuesday, and there was a Cocaine Anonymous meeting at the facility that following Monday. And I found a sponsor at that meeting. And
so you waited till one day
before.
Yeah.
And at the time I thought, well, I know that there's a Lambda place in Phoenix, and I can take a bus there. And the guy at the manager of the facility said, I think it's good that you want to check that out. He said, but don't be so specific with your recovery. It might be fine just to find whoever you connect to. Don't make it about,
a specific drug.
Just going to, so Lambda was like the gay.
Oh yeah.
The gay AA there in Phoenix. And it was fine. And I would go there like once a week. But my sponsor was somebody that I met at the Cocaine Anonymous meeting. And he actually lived in the same facility that I lived in 5 years previous. So we had a very similar story. But it was about a recovery. It wasn't about anything else. So, and the people that like his sponsor and their, that was like, it was the perfect group of people to meet. They were just successful and easy to be around. And, my grand sponsor's wife was someone I had noticed within that week, as someone that was like, she'd walk into a room and you'd be like, oh, she seems cool. She seems happy. She seems engaged with other people. I kind of want to meet her. And then ended up, that was my grand sponsor's wife, which was really cool.
That is cool.
Yeah. So, and we're still all very close too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you still have the same sponsor, or since you moved out here?
So I had when I lived in New York, I had a new sponsor in New York, and then I have a sponsor here.
Cool.
Yeah.
Have you stayed sober since that point? That's awesome.
Yeah. That was May 26, 2006.
What's been your biggest challenge since then?
Biggest challenge as far as my sobriety, and it takes work in and out of the rooms, is relationships. So, when a relationship doesn't go well or fails or ends, however you want to put it, is when it becomes the most difficult for my sobriety. And that's when I lean into it, because I know I need to.
Because a failed relationship means what?
That I failed.
And that means what?
It's, I take it to heart, and I feel like I wasn't paying attention, or if I wasn't, I have not been the one to instigate a breakup since I've been sober. So when I've lost relationships in sobriety, it feels like it's deeper. And each time that it's happened, I find new things to work on that were really important. My one relationship where I was married, that person was much younger than I am. And I learned something from that as far as my sobriety, or I learned something from that just in relationships in general, why that didn't work out and why I had such a hard time with it. And I worked with my sponsor with it, but then I was like, oh no, I need to work with my therapist on this instead. And we tapped into the inner child and past trauma and, all of those things. So I'm like, oh, it's not that I failed the relationship. It was that these parts weren't aligning, and this is probably actually, that person did you a favor. That was that's the short of it.
Yeah.
And the most recent breakup was actually a lot harder, because it was someone that I feel still bonded to. And that's the one where all of the stuff that I didn't work on in a deeper level with my dad came out with that breakup. And so I dug deeper and dug deeper and dug deeper, and worked with a therapist I still work with her, that she's not one of us, but she works with us. And, as far as, recovery.
Yeah.
And, she gets it.
But when I hear you say that, I can't help but think, wow, it's hard and painful. Just what you said, that breakup brought out the stuff that you didn't deal with your dad.
Yeah.
How many years ago was that?
Which time? We could talk about when he left. We can talk about when he died.
Okay.
We can talk about like all of the things, right? So it brings up my abandonment issues. That's really what it taps into. But then we can't, then we can talk about like with my therapist, we can talk about the abandonment, but we can also talk about another level of, you know, him leaving when I was 7, and the strained relationship between my parents and how that affected how much he was around. And, you know, he dated the woman across the street after my parents broke up, and seeing his car across the street, and, you know, things like that. I mean, there's so many levels of this trauma that I've thought I've dealt with in the past with therapists and with sponsors.
Let me stop you right there.
Yeah.
I love that you just said that. I thought I dealt with it.
Yeah.
I thought I dealt with it with past sponsors and with past therapists. Let me ask you, do you think now that you actually didn't deal with it, and define dealing with it? Because did you not work on it?
I worked on it.
Or did you not finish working on it?
Didn't finish working on it.
And my question around this is because the shoulds of when we're like in our mind about especially when we start working on ourselves so much in sobriety and recovery, as much as we like to think, oh, I'm you know, working on myself, I'm out of shame now and whatever. Yeah. There's a lot that's really sneaky and hiding, just like this. Because where I'm going to challenge you is, in your mind, you're thinking, you know, even now you say, I thought I dealt with it. Well, what you were really saying is, I thought that I worked on it and I should have finished it. But at every stage along the way, when we're dealing with trauma, whatever type of mental health, the steps of addiction and relapse prevention, I always say layers of the onion.
Right.
So with whatever sponsor you're talking about, with whatever therapist you're talking about, and whatever work you did with them on this subject, did you not do what was possible for you to do at that time relating to this specific thing?
Well, right. Because it was very specific to what I was going through at the moment.
Right.
And then I meet people, or I'm in conversation with people, or I'm in a relationship with somebody, and it creates another layer of depth and closeness. And I think because I worked on what I worked on, then there was like another door that opened where I'm like,
exactly,
I'm going to let you in. I think I can trust you I can let you in here now, where I guess I wasn't before.
Well, when you say here, is that a place that you even visited yourself?
No. I mean, I think it was interesting because after my divorce, it was and again, this person was, you know, 19 years younger than I am. And it was a different kind of relationship. It was almost a parent-child relationship in a lot of ways. And I was going to protect this person, and I was going to do the things that my dad didn't do for me. My dad didn't show up for me in so many different ways that I don't want this to happen to this really beautiful person. And so I'm going to be this person for them. And they had great parents, and I respected them a lot, but in the relationship, somehow I felt like I kind of just stepped into this role. So when I didn't have that purpose anymore, I was like, oh, so I'm not going to do this in the next relationship. I need to find more of an equal in the next relationship. And that's the relationship I had before I got sober. So I thought. Mm-hmm. So I was afraid of being in that relationship again, or that kind of relationship again, because when that fell apart is when my addictions really kicked in. So I was like, I need to be careful. I need to be, you know, even though I'm going to find someone that's closer to my age and closer to someone that's, you know, the same level of success and the same level of mindset and what have you. It took me a minute to really trust that this was going to be okay. But my guardedness came across to that other person as someone that wasn't ready to be in a relationship. And we went to couples therapy because I thought that maybe that's what we needed. I thought that he was very codependent and, you know, all these different things that I was placing on him, when in fact there were things that I needed to throw up that mirror and go, you know, you're he's fine. You're the one that's freaking out and you're throwing it back at him. And it turned into him just not being able to handle it anymore. And then that was the realization for me that I really did let him into a place that I'd never let anybody else in before. And when it was right before he was moving out, I said, I'm going to be working on this. And I said, you respect my recovery. You respect what I've done in that part of my life. And I said, that's the level of concern I have for how I wasn't showing up for you. That's the same level of concern that I wasn't able to do that. I'm going to work on that and work on why I wasn't doing that for you and why I wasn't listening to your needs and why I put up a wall. And
all those things make sense to me, starting with one of the first questions I asked you in this last piece was, you let this person into a part of you that nobody had been let into before. And I said, had you even gone in there? And you said, no. How on earth do you open? It's like, you're going to host another individual in this brand new part of your home you never, didn't even know existed. And it's not ready, and you haven't even you're walking in together like, oh, here's a room, here's a and it's not clean. You're like, I don't know why it's dirty,
dusty in here.
Yeah, dusty, and there's some skeletons in here. I swear I didn't kill these people. What I'm trying to bring metaphor into this, right. But yeah, it makes sense when you haven't, when you get to a place, and because relationship is a way that your primary trauma occurred, and you're seeking, in a manner of speaking, healing through relationship. I might be putting words in your mouth.
No, you're right there.
But what makes that not work is the relationship that is healthiest has to start with you. And if you don't work on that relationship with yourself and enter those parts of you first, you can't heal that stuff. You're walking that person into your unhealed trauma together. And then that's where you're living.
Oh yeah. And it was.
So
it wasn't very healthy.
No, but I always say
it was messy.
That's the journey of life. That's the journey of recovery. You don't know, and you don't know better until it's happened.
Right. And
so did it need to or have to happen that way? Maybe, but it's the thing that got you to where you were, to where you could see that part of yourself and then work on it. There's collateral damage. Yeah. But that's what the steps are for. That's what there's ways for us to take ownership and, heal the wreckage of our past when it happens.
Right.
Because more wreckage continues to happen beyond the getting sober, despite what we'd love to, what we and our loved ones would like to think. The bottle might go away, the powder might go away, but all that other stuff is still there, still comes up.
Not to go off on a tangent, but what I learned kind of on the periphery with the one breakup was that about attachment and about being anxious attachment. And
what are you?
I'm really good at being anxious.
I like how you worded that.
I'm really good at being that. And I just assumed that that's how this one that we just broke up, not just broke up. It's been a little bit, but, my therapist had me read a book, and there's a worksheet, and I did the worksheet from his perspective. I thought, okay, he did all these things, and I'm sure the number is going to come up that he was anxious, and it was positive. It was, what is it? Anxious, avoidant. And then there's
secure, right?
Secure.
Yeah.
And secure. So I thought, oh, his number is going to come up that he was an anxious attachment to me. And it came up secure. And I thought, I did that wrong. I'm going to do this again. I'm going to wait. I'm going to put it down. I'm going to do this like in a week and make sure I was thinking about this the right way. And I talked to my therapist about it. And she goes, yeah, just try it again. I said, and it came up as secure again.
You came up as secure?
No, he did.
He did. That's so interesting to me because typically even someone who functions normally in secure attachment, when paired up with somebody that is anxious, it moves them into avoidant.
Right.
So the fact
I thought for sure it would have been either either avoidant or that's
very interesting.
Very interesting.
Wow.
It gave me a new perspective on how he was in the relationship. Mm-hmm. And what I thought were things that were codependent or, this uncomfortableness of how he wanted to be around me. I was like, oh, that's my stuff.
Yeah.
He just wanted to love me. And I kept going, I don't know if I'm ready. You know what I mean? Like, I wouldn't say those things or hear that in my head, but in my actions, it would be this pushback.
So what has your healing looked like in the work that you've done since then, with stuff around your dad? And
so it's all therapist driven. I have talked to my sponsor about it, who is also a therapist, but we keep that boundary really strict. But with my therapist, she just kept going and leveling deeper and deeper and challenging me and finding an acceptance of the fact that he's just this human being that did the best he could. And with the relationship he had with me and the relationship he had with my mom after this breakup, and after also he came around. This is really what she was trying to do, is that 3 years before he passed away, he came around a lot. And even though I wasn't living in the same city, he was available and he was there, and really try to make up for a lot. And when I think of him, and I think of, if my brain ever goes to that place of, you didn't show up for me, you did show up for me, because you did do your best, and really did your best at the end. So that's who I think of now. I don't think of the 28-year-old that was going over to his girlfriend's house across the street and not paying attention to the fact that his son saw his car across the street. Yeah. That's not the dad that I concentrate on now. I concentrate on the dad that was loving. And when I told him I was going to quit my job to be an artist, and his encouragement and how cool he thought that was, that's the man that I think of now. It's still sad because I would love for him to see all the things that I've been able to accomplish in my life. But I want to think that even those 3 years were integral in my strength, and very influential.
You know, you and I have talked about, because our parents are around the age range, and mine are both still living, but I think that, you know, we find as we as humans get, you know, grow through life, that veil of like my parent, thinking that our parents have this, like, I don't know, we look at them as just like there's this something that they go through parent school or something, that, right, you know, and they know better, right? There's a manual that's been given to them, so we hold them to this higher standard or whatever. And at whatever point we realize, oh wait, they were just big kids that
had kids.
Because don't you still just feel like a big kid that's just gotten older? I mean, like it never, and I think that ultimately what parents want, and that's, I mean, I guess if every parent wants something different, But I think that when you look at end of life and like what means the most to them, to get to see is their kid become self-actualized, at peace, and love what they're doing. And it sounds like he got to see that with you.
He did. Yeah, he got to see a level of independence and somebody that, had a motivation and yeah.
It's beautiful.
It's pretty cool. Yeah.
This has been such a great conversation, James. I feel like we could talk so many, I know we could because we have before.
Do a part 2.
Yeah. Yeah. But for the person or people, and I like to say person because I think that a lot of times people tune in thinking they might be the only one.
Yeah.
So if you're listening or watching and you think you're the only one and your story is resonating with James's, what, James, would you like to say to that person as a, closing word of encouragement to them?
It gets better. If you're struggling, I hear you, and you're not alone. And as a sober person, if you're struggling with that if you can stay sober, it will help and it will get better. And don't do it alone.
That's a big one.
Absolutely don't do it alone. There are thousands and millions of people out there that want to help.
That's so true.
Yeah.
So true. Thank you so much. This has been such a beautiful conversation.
Thank you. Thanks for asking.
This time has flown by. Yeah. Well, with that, we got to say goodbye to our audience. Thank you for joining us as always. And I'll remind each of you, as I always do, that it's never too late to start loving yourself. And you're only ever one decision away from a completely different life.
This podcast is brought to you by Promises Behavioral Health. If you or a loved one are struggling with trauma, addiction, or mental health, we are ready to answer your questions and help you take that next step. Call our admission center at 888-648-4098 or visit us online at www.promises.com. Our team is ready and waiting to answer the call for help.